I, Philip Joseph Pierre.
I would like to be judged as being the Prime Minister, not being judged as being part of a government.
Came into government that we had a manifesto and a vision and mission that had been approved by my party, by the highest body.
Basel 11 has not been in existence. 50 was...
Giant getting bazooka. Spraying big on to knock out mosquitoes.
I have never had a joint account with anybody in my life. Not my ex-wife, not my children, nobody. And I will refer that to the Privileges Committee.
What about the culture of people getting into office and not being effective?
What people become Prime Minister of St. Lucia have been the most ready.
Let's do it this Wednesday, because if it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. A very good evening to you. Welcome to another edition of Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. With me, Timothy Polio. We'll go up until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we conclude with the clip that peaked. Well, over the last several years, and in particular over the last few months in St. Lucia, we have had an escalation in terms of violence. And this evening we need to zero in on what we describe as youth black on black violence, because in the main it's basically young black males who are killing other black males and even sometimes injuring them in the process, and leaving in jeopardy a lot of unfathered children and broken homes. So we'll be focusing on this during the course of our broadcast, as we have so far recorded some 71 homicides for this year. What prompted me to focus on this subject is a statement that was issued this week by the president of the Ayanola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari, and that is Mr. Aaron Alexander. Let us listen to that statement.
Firstly, we fully condemn in the strongest words possible these acts of aggression and violence being carried out amongst our youth, one towards the other. This sort of behavior is indicative of our conditioning on the slave plantations, where brothers were pitted against each other, fighting to the death, usually armed with a hammer, just as a form of entertainment for the slave plantation owners and their friends. This was rampant during the slavery days, and these sentiments towards each other has passed down through our DNA and memory cells, and we are all aware that we are suffering from a condition known clinically as post-traumatic slave syndrome. Our youth are suffering from an identity crisis in many ways, brought on deliberately through our colonial education system, and this is widespread throughout the Caribbean region. Our youth needs to be reconditioned to learn better ways of socializing with each other, with a view of not allowing the petty disputes which they will have from time to time from getting to a deadly violent end. They need to have greater tolerance and patience with each other, learn techniques to diffuse confrontations, and give each other the benefit of the doubt. Our youth need to change their lifestyles as well, which may lead to such fatal consequences. Our youth need to feel a greater sense of belonging and attachment to something more positive and more beneficial to them, instead of gravitating towards gang death because there is no life being involved in gangs. We parents need to take a greater responsibility for our children and play a more pivotal role in helping to curb the violence amongst our youth population. Community folks, we need to stop being fearful in calling on the youth when we see their behaviors being exhibited which can lead to violence, or at least make a call to the authorities. Recently we have seen fatal outcomes from gun violence, which took the life of a young lady, and a stabbing along the Millennium Highway, which took the life of a young man, and a child currently undergoing surgery after sustaining a gunshot to the face. This has got to stop, my people, and it will take all of us acting with one mindset to bring the situation to a halt.
From the president of ICA, the Ayanola Council for Advancement of Rastafari, Mr. Aaron Alexander. By the way, he's my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live broadcast. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here this evening.
and it's a pleasure to have this discussion because I think it's long overdue, and it is something that, you know, we have to put on the table. You know, we have to say that when it comes to crime, we must put all our weapons, all our tools on the table to fight crime in whatever way it shall appear. We must use everything at our disposal to throw out crime.
You have highlighted several areas that you attribute to the youth black on black violence that we are experiencing in St. Lucia. The only area I think that I have a difficulty with is when you say that young people are suffering from post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yes.
What is this all about from your perspective?
Okay, well, I'll show the audience this book that I'm currently reading. And in this book, it details and it tells us the effects of the dehumanization from the slave plantation of young black men. And in situations where you had the slave plantation owners, they used to pit brother against brother, fight to the death just as entertainment. And you had situations where when you had a strong black male on a plantation, the slave plantation owners would, just to instill fear in the rest of the slaves, they would take that strong black man, strapping strong black man, and tie him to a horse, one facing the east and one facing the west, and they would whip that horse, and those horses would split that man apart, bust him in front of his woman, his children, and the other slaves, just to set an example to keep the slaves in check and keep them in fear of revolting and rebelling against the plantation owners and so on and so forth. So this book details and shows you how these things are passed down from generations, that fear that is instilled in us as people, as African descendants, and that rivalry, that sense of us always fighting with each other on the plantations just to entertain the slave plantation owner. These things are passed down through us. It makes us hate each other. It causes us to have like a vibe whereby we don't like to see each other succeed. We don't like to see each other move forward. We don't glorify in the success of each other, and that has caused us to always want to tear down each other in whatever way we can. We don't have patience with each other. Before somebody, you know, do you something, there could be so many responses you can give, but you choose to be violent towards that person. We're not tolerant towards each other. So it is an effect. It's a clinical condition as well that is described as being post-traumatic slave syndrome that has passed down from generation to generation. And we have not done enough to address that hurt, you know, that kind of situation we're coming from as a people. We have not done enough to even address that kind of situation. So you find our youths are in a sense that they don't know who they are. They don't have that sense of identity to realize the condition that we come from, what we have experienced as a people. They have lost that to realize that we need to make a change, like Bob Marley said, to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. That is all part of the mental slavery that is in us, and it comes down from generation to generation. It's in our DNA. It is in our memory cells that we behave violent towards each other. So that is some of the things that we are going through even now with our youth, the way that they are behaving towards each other. I believe that we need to address this thing. We need to get into the school system, speak to our youth, teach them to be more tolerant towards each other, teach them to be more patient with each other, so that we could see if we could get a dent in the whole crime scourge that we're going through. Those that are out there already on the blocks and involved in crime, it is hard to reach them. But the Form 4s, the Form 5s that are going to join those people in a couple years' time, we need to see if we could reach them before it gets to that state.
But if you're saying that's the remnants of the effects of slavery, therefore we definitely have not turned our negative experience into a positive, because we have had so many leaders, your Nelson Mandela, your Martin Luther King, and before that even a whole host of other people who have emanated out of the slavery, and who have excelled and who have been preaching peace. So therefore, do you think that against the background of what I just said there, we should really give credence to your analysis of the situation, primarily because it is coming out of a book?
Well, Tim, when we look at the reality on the ground, for example, go to any school, secondary school today, and ask the children about Martin Luther King. Ask them how many of them know about Martin Luther King and his message, and see how many hands goes up. Ask the children how many of them know about Nelson Mandela See how many hands goes up. Ask them how many of them know about Marcus Garvey. See how many hands goes up. Right here in St. Lucia, we had a great Pan-African leader, John Quinlan. Ask them how many of them know about John Quinlan. See how many hands goes up. So yes, these men came. Their message is there, but how accessible and who points the youth towards that direction to learn about what these men taught? It is not been taught in the schools. You don't learn about men like Martin Luther King and Marcus Garvey and this. You don't learn about these men in schools. So our children are still being denied that education, that level that they could make a transformation in their lives by learning about those leaders. These things are still being denied our children. So that is why even recently, the Ainola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari, AICA, we wrote to the Minister of Education about this, and we told him we would like permission to go into the school system to speak to our youth about those things. And thank God he saw the light in what we're saying, and the Chief Education Officer gave us a letter of permission for us to go into the school system, engage with the principals, and see how best we could have those little pep talks about those sorts of leaders and their message. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr., the message of non-violence. All these things need to be in our school system, and it is not there, Tim. And that is what we are trying to do. Even as we speak, we met with a few principals today of certain schools that we're going to go into the schools and start that process of educating our children about such leaders and the message that they preach, to see if we could make that dent in the whole violence that is going on, because it is absent from the school. The teachings of these men are absent in the school system.
But I don't think that naturally there's some young people or people in general have a proclivity to get involved in acts of a criminal nature, because we are primarily made of people of African descent, who emanate from Africa, the descendants of Africans and so on in St. Lucia. Don't you think it's inevitable that if we have a tendency to be violent and to engage in deviant behavior, it automatically will be black on black violence?
Yes.
Who are we going to fight if not ourselves in this particular scenario, this particular situation?
The reality is, Tim, we will never be able to eliminate it, but we could at least bring it down, bring down the rate at which it is occurring. And that is the problem I have, because look, you just said a while ago, how many murders? 71. So maybe if we try a different approach, we might see less murders. I mean, one murder is too many, as they say, but in terms of figures, I mean, we could see a reduced figure in our murder rate if we have this kind of intervention that we're talking about. And this is something that has never been done before. And we know the conventional ways: more police, more boots on the ground, this and that, more equipment for the police and so on. And these things, they have their place.
Shouldn't we see it from that perspective, the deficiencies that you've just highlighted, instead of focusing on post-traumatic slave syndrome? It means that we're not taking responsibility for our actions.
Well, we have to know why we're not taking responsibility for our actions.
Poor leadership.
Well, again,
lack of initiative.
Yes, and post-traumatic slave syndrome is not one thing, Tim. It's a variety of things. It's multiple things. But this is one of the things that doctors. This is a clinical condition that we have found ourselves in. That is why, again, like Bob Marley said, to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, we have a problem.
But I don't think if the population 50-50, blacks 50%, and the population consisting of 50 whites, don't you think 50% whites? Don't you think it would be blacks against whites?
Well, it could
instead of what you make reference to.
They would still have a certain level of black against black.
And then now what you say?
That I would say that we need to deal with violence. We need to deal with educating people. We need to deal with the situation
probably you would say that the blacks are avenging the fact that the slave masters
so they're taking
whites.
No, I wouldn't say that, because you see, by and large, black people are not about revenge. Because if we were about revenge, Tim, look at South Africa, for example, after apartheid.
But right now, don't you think in St. Lucia, it's all about revenge. It's about taking revenge for, let's say, you consider that you were somehow belittled, you were disrespected, because that's all.
You mean between black and black?
Because black.
You get that as well. But I'm saying, with those interventions, you'll be able to speak to these kind of issues about vengeance and revenge and all these things, because a lot of the violence too, there's situations of disrespect. All these things are happening that causing crime as well. But again, it goes back to our conditioning, and what we are suffering from. Because, like I said earlier, it is not what somebody do to you, but it's how you respond
respond to what the person did to you. You know, somebody could step on your toe, you could choose to step on their toe back, you could choose to give them a gorget, you could choose to chop them, you could choose to, so many things, but the choices you make at that instance, that is what that determines the outcome of the situation.
And it could be because you're suffering from post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yeah.
And not because of a breakdown of law and order, not because you cannot depend on a justice system that is efficient, that will dispense justice.
Well, we have our problems there too, Tim. With the justice system, we have problems in there as well, because some people, like, you know, the whole aspect of revenge, people feel like nothing is going to be done in the courts and so on, it takes too long or whatever, and they take the matters in their own hands and they do things. So even the justice system have the fault as well, you know, and like Martin Luther King Jr. said, justice delayed is justice denied. So the justice system really needs to serve us better than they are doing currently. So all these things contribute towards crime as well, you know. But again, I'm saying it's not one thing, but this approach, what we're talking about there right now, this is something that we have never delved into. So it is worth looking at, it is worth seeing the merit in it, and let us see how we could implement some components of it within our school system to talk to our youth, try to reach them, and try to see how we could curb the violence.
But I don't think the evidence is there, clear for us to see, that a number of the young people engaged in deviant behavior who end up at the Bordelais Correctional Facility and even at the Boys Training Center, look at their background, coming from single home families, lack of education, employment opportunities. Those are the issues compared to other young black males in St. Lucia who are coming from a more stable environment, who have the family structure very much in place and will attend school and so on. They're less likely to be involved in acts of that nature, the criminal activities that we're talking about.
That's true. That is true. That is why it goes to show you that, like people have said, it takes a community to raise a child. So even though you may have a single parent, but if other neighbors, other men in the neighborhood would step up and look at those children that are there in single parent households, and they could play a role in that as well, in raising those children and calling on those children, because a single parent household doesn't automatically mean that that child will be deviant or that child will turn out bad. But I'm saying in those situations, if a single mother, for example, because mostly single parent is mothers, if they need the intervention, there should be agencies that they could go to get the intervention, to get the support. And even in the community, you know, fathers, because every community have fathers, and single women that are raising children, the fathers that are in that community should look at themselves as the father of all the children in the community, to protect the children in the community. And if they see one or two that is going astray, they have a responsibility to call on them as well and father them, because for some reason their father not around, whether it be their father themselves were involved in crime and they were killed, or their father is sitting in jail, or the father go overseas to look for a better life. All different reasons come into play, but we have to look out for each other, and that is one of the things I think we need as well. We need to stop being fearful. You know, there are times where people tell you, if they see somebody child doing something, they don't want to tell them nothing because the parent might come after them and all and so on. We must stop having those fears.
Reality?
It happens, Tim, but we should never cower. We should never bow to those things. We must take a firm stance, and as long as we know we're not going to raise our hand on the person's child and so on, but we can call on them. Watch today, I went and picked up my daughter from the entry post-secondary school, and as I park in on the side to pick up my daughter, I just see a young guy fell to the ground, and as soon as he stood up, he turned around and he started cuffing another, punching another young man. And I had to just pack my van quickly and run outside and pull them apart and tell them what's going on, what's happening. So the guy now is saying that the young man tripped him, and the one he's accusing of tripping him say, well, that one threw something on him. So I asked him, well, what did he throw on the guy? He said a leaf. I said, well, you shouldn't throw anything on anybody because you instigated what just happened, and you have to take responsibility and apologize to the young man for throwing something on him in the first place. And I said to the other guy who tripped the other one, I said to him, look, the guy threw something on you. There could have been so many responses you could have given to that situation, but you choose to trip him. He could have hurt himself, you know, and so on and so forth. And I got them to apologize to each other. So, I mean, we as adults, we have to intervene in this kind of situation, and don't be fearful that, oh, that boy is, well, I'll bring my father behind you, I'll bring my mother behind you. We mustn't have this kind of fear, even in our community, even though from time to time these things happen, because even in the school system, children bring their parents behind the teachers and and all kind of things happen in the school. These things happen. So the parents themselves have to take responsibility. If another parent is cautioning you and telling you something about your child's deviant behavior, you have to be humble enough to accept that, because we all want good for our children.
So I'm saying to you, those are the solutions, instead of even wanting to focus on post-traumatic slave syndrome. That is what I have a difficulty with. When you adopt that kind of posture, we're not taking responsibility for our actions. And maybe some lawyer can decide to use that and get the client off on some kind of technicality. I don't see that kind of approach standing up in court. My client is suffering from post-traumatic slave syndrome, Your Honor.
Well,
how will that work?
Well, the lawyer will have to give the evidence, because I mean, at the condition we're talking about there, when you approach this and you go to the schools and you talk to the children, you don't tell them about post-traumatic slave syndrome. You've recognized, because we have to first recognize that we have a problem. We have to recognize that something is wrong fundamentally or otherwise. That the first step to solving a problem is to admit that there is a problem. So those of us who are aware of the problem, we go in there with solutions. So we go in there to teach exactly the scenario I told you what happened if the children. You go there with that kind of attitude to show the children how we could be more tolerant with each other, more patient with each other, and not be quick to anger and rage and so on and so forth. That is the approach you will take. But you as the adult, you've learned about those things, you know the condition, so you now have to tackle it with solutions, you know. So that's if in mentioning it, it's just mentioning that it's a condition that we are suffering from, but it doesn't mean that you're going to go in there and talk to the children about that in particular. You go there with solutions and teach them coping skills, you know, how to survive among each other, socializing with each other, and so on, making sure that they don't get violent towards each other. That's how you approach it, you know.
What do you think has prevented us from taking that approach? We're talking about a responsibility, a role for civil society in St. Lucia, because people are saying in St. Lucia, civil society is not vibrant. I think it's worse than that. Civil society is non-existent. Do you think that is at the heart of the problem?
I don't think it's non-existent. I think that civil society entities tend to go on a political level whereby it depends on who's in power. They either take mumu tablets or they talk a lot, you know. And that is one thing. Coming in as the president of ICA, I've always vowed that I'm not going to be that sort of a person being involved in an organization like ICA, which is a civil society organization. Even
if you get assistance directly from the Prime Minister, the government, to organize your
it doesn't matter, Tim. It doesn't matter. I believe in talking truth to power, and I believe that any mature Prime Minister or government will take constructive criticism, and sometimes you may do it openly, or sometimes you will send a WhatsApp or call up a minister or something and speak with them. Because, for example, Honorable Richard Frederick in Central Castries, he's my rep from Central Castries, that's where I'm from, and from time to time I would call him and show him different ideas of Central Castries and tell him certain things. Like one time they were putting when they were putting the flower pots where the vendors were there opposite the old fire station area, and I felt that some of them were too big. I was saying, but where will a wheelchair pass and that kind of thing, you know? And I called him up and I mentioned that to him, and he told me, yes, Aaron, you know, we actually were thinking about that, you know. And when I passed there, I saw the guys working, and I call on one of them. I say, my brother, remember there are people on wheelchairs, and those flower pots are so humongous, it might take up all the space on the sidewalk. So I mean, this our country, we have to make suggestions, we have to see things as well, and if politicians are mature enough, they're going to accept and say, well, yeah, you know, that making sense, my brother. So whether it be Prime Minister or any minister or so on, you should feel free to be able to do that in your country, whether you do it openly or you do it, you know, privately, you know. But we need to do those things. And even with the crime situation we have, we need organizations to come up with ideas, you know, and share it freely. You know, don't think of, you know, because that party is in power, you want them to look bad, so you'll not share no ideas with them. You'll wait till another party come in office that's more favorable to you. We should get away from those things, and regardless of who's in power, we must always speak truth to power.
But how can we change our mindset as far as this is concerned when we are so polarized one way or the other? Because there definitely is need for a vibrant civil society, and ICA that could raise the various issues, and other interest groups, your National Youth Council, and so on. They definitely need to change their approach, but how will this be done so that instead of focusing primarily on post-traumatic slave syndrome, we can focus on the other things that are within our immediate control to improve the lives of our young males?
I think in civil society groups, you know, again, they should find their voice. They should always have their voice. And it doesn't mean that because you criticize something that you're against a government, because sometimes you may criticize all you criticize, and when the time comes and that bell rings, you might still end up going and vote for that same government you criticize so many times. So politicians should not be thin-skinned and try to victimize people when people criticize them. I mean, they're in public office and people will see things that they think that can be better, and civil society must play a great role. The churches, and from time to time I have made calls to civil society themselves to speak up about issues that is happening in the country. Don't pretend like you take more tablets, because it's going to affect you. It's going to come to your doorstep. And crime is something for sure we know is when it escalates, it affects everybody. It even affects our ability to earn as a country, because if we have all this high level of crime, countries are going to warn their citizens not to visit our country, because, as you know, tourism is our lifeblood. So we have an obligation to speak out. And as ICA, I took that vow, I took that oath. No matter who's in power, I'm going to speak out. I don't regard whether the government assists ICA or not. I think they have a moral obligation to do so, and if they decide not to do that, well, it's on them. It's like the same situation. I look at it even when the former Prime Minister withdrew the subvention to the National Trust. I mean, that was on him to do that, and he did it. Another government come, they reinstated it. But I'm saying whether an organization is critical of you or not, you should never try to victimize them on no level at all. And a mature government would not do something like that.
You think that was victimization because an explanation was given as to why the National Trust was not, or the subvention was stopped?
Yes, and I think even with the National Trust, even when they came out and they refuted what the former Prime Minister said, I mean, I was a member of the National Trust, and I know to some extent how they operate, and I would not venture to say that they are political. I mean, there are times that they give leeway, they allow certain things to happen, and there are other times that they would speak out on certain issues. So even at the time that all this fracas was going on, I mean, we had the former Prime Minister, Sir John, his daughter was involved with that, and the Prime Minister at the time is in the heart and the belly of the party formed by her father. So you would think that there would be some level of understanding if she criticized him or this kind of things, but it seemed as if, well, it was a bit heavy-handed. I find that if at least you're going to stop the subvention, at least do it maybe on a level whereby, okay, you inform them that this year is going to be a year that that's the last time they'll receive the full subvention. The following year they might get 50%. You know, you do it, you break it down. You don't just all of a sudden cut the line like that. I find that was heavy-handed, Tim.
Let's continue on youth and youth violence. But why do you think, therefore, that, and I think at some point in time you would have, through some clip that you sent me, we might play it a little bit later, it is being suggested that young people, particularly those on the wrong side of the law, they are arrested, they're taken to court, they provide free labor, and then you have a situation where they must seek legal representation that comes at a cost and so on. So you're generally talking about exploitation. Now at the local level, don't you think that politicians have a tendency to exploit young black men?
Well, not young black men alone, people generally.
But since we're talking about youth and violence,
I mean, even they tell you, there are some jurisdictions that tell you like crime is big business. It's just like war is big business. So there are people who benefit from death. You know, from us killing each other, people killing each other, people benefit from that as well, because there's, like you mentioned, there's a whole system that is in place for legal representation, the courts, the funeral homes, everybody, you know, there's money to be made out of death. So, I mean, we have to recognize those things and try to ensure we behave ourselves in a way that we don't let the people profit on us in that kind of way. And all these kind of things it goes back again to show that we have not learned, we are not in a position where we have educated ourselves enough and be intelligent enough to realize the amount of people who benefit from us killing each other, you know, and this is another thing that our young men, our young people need to learn, you know, and all these things are being kept away. Earlier you mentioned about why is it that these things are not in our school system, and I was going to respond by letting you know that, remember, our education system is a neo-colonial education system that we have inherited, and it's a deliberate attempt to keep us ignorant of those great leaders who you just mentioned earlier, the Nelson Mandelas and the Martin Luther King and so on, because they don't want us to know about these men. They don't want us to be educated about these men. And our education leaders, our leaders of education, from our minister and so on, they need to recognize those things and make a deliberate attempt, because it was deliberately done unto us to keep that level of education away from us. So we have to make a deliberate attempt to reintroduce and bring these things in our school system.
But Mr. Alexander, why do you think that there's this tardiness, almost appears to be deliberate, in not reviewing our curriculum? Because there's been analyses conducted. People have admitted that there is need to review the school curriculum, even at the local level in St. Lucia. Several ministers of education have reached that conclusion. What is preventing them from taking that deliberate step to effect that change?
Tim, many times some people have always alluded to the notion that a lot of our leaders are puppets. Puppets of who? Puppets to who? You know, these are the questions we need to ask. Who's pulling the strings, you know? And these are some of the questions we need to answer. Because I think that sometimes our leaders, you know, they are puppets for real. And there are higher forces that are instructing them not to do this and not to do that, you know, in fear of maybe sanctions, or in fear of reprisals, or whatever the case might be. You find some leaders become very timid, and they have, because even if you look at the issue of cannabis, for example, watch how long that fight has been on for legalizing cannabis. And I mean, it has been illegal now for almost 100 years, and it's only now, you know, as if, well, somebody had to show them the way, or somebody or some bigger country had to start legalizing it at their home for us to subconsciously, like, they give us permission for us to do it as well. And you hear all Caribbean leaders want to jump on the cannabis industry, and all the years we've been there, and especially the Rastafari community have been advocating for that for eons, and it's never been given the light of day. And as soon as you see America start going down that road, all Caribbean countries want to follow. So we have become that sort of a people that we want to watch what others do, especially big countries that have a big stick, before we actually do certain things. So I think there's a lot of fear even within our leaders, you know, and fear is something that is used for control purposes, and we could be threatened with sanctions, we could be threatened with different you know, different kind of punishments if we go down a certain road. And I believe these things had a lot to play, a part to play, because even in the earlier days, in the days of men like Bob Marley singing all this conscious reggae music, emancipate yourself from mental slavery and brainwash education and all these kind of things, and Burning Spear will tell you Christopher Columbus is a damn blasted liar. In all those times there, the Black Panther movement and all these things, we had real opportunity, you know, to make those changes. And I always consider in 1997 with a 16-1 victory, even constitution reform, you know, or amendment, whatever it took for us to revamp our education system. Governments have gotten those mandates. Even now, this current government with that majority, you know, in parliament, they could do a lot of things, and they could do a lot of things to benefit the country and to open the eyes of people and to bring things into our education system. Our people want those things, but I don't know what, there's a fear, you know, there's a fear that, you know, some kind of a retribution might come, or some kind of a punishment might come from the countries with the bigger sticks, you know, if we do those things. But if we don't do it, Tim, the cost will be very high, and I believe that, you know, to fight crime, we have to move away from the traditional things, or rather take the traditional things that has worked, go with them, and incorporate other things into the crime fighting efforts that we are doing.
You think the fear that you attributing to our leaders, you think it is justified, or is it a case where our leaders are just not sufficiently bold and creative. They don't want to bite the bullet. They don't want to take chances. They just do not want to do things in a different way to get some kind of different result.
Well, I don't know if some of them are fearful because, politicians always like to ensure that they butter their bread, so to speak, in a way that they're going to win the next elections. And maybe that is something also that they are giving due consideration to. But I always say to myself that, it is, whether you win or lose an election, it is always good to do the right thing. And doing the right thing, sometimes, they tell you have to break eggs to make omelette, and you have to do those things. You have to step on toes, and there are some educators that might be resistant because even in the earlier days, that there are some principals who were against even Rastafarians coming into schools, and that was a fight we had on our hands. So, we have to keep pushing the envelope. We have to ensure that we keep keep things going. And fear is not of the Almighty. We have to try to eliminate that fear that is within us as a people, and realize that we could achieve greatness. I'm sure Juju was fearful of going on that big stage and running in the Olympics, and look what came out of it, So fear is something that could be very crippling, and we must always do the right thing. No matter where we find ourselves in life, we must always do the right thing.
Why do you think, talking about doing the right thing, why do you think that there hasn't been this great exhibition or demonstration on the part of so-called right-thinking people in St. Lucia to clearly indicate that the youth-on-youth violence, particularly involving our young men, something must be done, if not to eradicate, but definitely to bring it under some level of control?
Sure.
Because I realized that in 2020, when there was this Black Lives Matter protest action or demonstration outside the island's parliament, and the suggestion was that it's because of the killing of George Floyd in May of 2020 in the United States. To me, that it appears there wasn't sufficient justification for it to be replicated in St. Lucia. I always felt it was a political issue.
Okay.
It was politics on the cusp of a general election, so opportunities were taken to demonstrate that it's about time we have a black prime minister because of the perception that the then Prime Minister Anand Shastri is white.
Yeah, I was involved in it, as you know. I was one of the frontliners, and to be honest with you, Tim, I never went on into that activity as any political thing because, as you know, I run for the Green Party. So there was not, I don't know if others were on that sort of a mission, but I never was on that mission about black or white, because me being Rastafari, my example is His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie, and what he taught us is that, and even great leaders like Martin Luther King, all these men spoke about judging somebody according to the content of their character and not on the color of their skin. And even His Majesty spoke to that, until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eyes, because like they are white oppressors, they are black oppressors likewise, Tim. So I do not look at person's color of skin. I look at people policy. I look at how somebody governs and so on, and how somebody carries themselves, and I look at those things instead of skin color. So on the Black Lives Matter thing, I was never on any political thing. I can only speak for myself.
Let's break it down. What was the justification for having this march?
The George Floyd and black, not the George Floyd situation, and the constant killing of black people by especially white policemen in America.
Yeah, but this does not happen in St. Lucia.
It doesn't happen here.
So I just get it. I just did not get the link or the association. We don't have a situation in St. Lucia where we have white police officers killing our black people, our black males. Yeah. We don't have that at all.
No, we don't have. Right? We don't have.
So I don't know why we had to emulate what was happening in the United States. What was the justification?
To me, I looked at it as just showing solidarity with black Americans.
But why not show solidarity and deliberately target and focus on what is happening in St. Lucia, the black on black violence?
Now that is why right now, as I'm speaking with you, I'm talking about the focus on that issue. Now at the time, maybe it was an oversight, maybe it was, like you say, maybe there were persons there who were on a political thing and they never looked at it that way. But I
would like to say it's not maybe.
Yeah.
I would like to say it was.
Okay, well, I was not exposed to it on that level.
But
so
I don't think, Mr. Alexander, you're that naive not to have realized what was happening.
Nah, man. I didn't get that width of nothing like that, because I mean, I was there involved showing solidarity with Black America, but I totally get your point that, hey, even here in St. Lucia, the black on black violence that has been going on, why not focus on that? I totally get that point, and that is why even now in the thrust that I'm moving forward there is dealing with that particular issue of black on black violence. And I mean, if we have to talk about having a protest or demonstration or so on for black on black violence, say every time you hear a youth man kill another youth man, you know, if you have to do that, you could imagine the amount of protests and demonstration. I mean, look, you just mentioned 71 murders. I mean, that would mean 71 rallies. So we have to.
But what we must understand is that we have not had not one rally. Not one focusing on black violence.
Yes. Now, I think that this is something that we need to change. I think the persons who were very enthusiastic about the George Floyd and putting on that protest at the time, and as you know, Brother Ipa was one of the persons in the forefront of that movement as well, and I was there with him as well, and I just stood up as showing solidarity with Black America, and that was my main focus. And I didn't focus because even we invited the Prime Minister himself at the time, and he, through his I think it was his attaché Nancy Charles, I was in constant communication with her, finding out if he was coming and so on and so forth. So all that again did not I was not of the view that, you know, it was something against Alan Chasney for that protest, that march and so on, that demonstration. It never dawned on me that, because I was in touch with Nancy Charles trying to get Honorable Alan Chasney to be there, and he himself was saying, tell the police, give us permission, because remember we had the fracas, the police didn't want to give us permission, and he gave us, you know, he spoke with the police officers, the CMO at the time too was saying no, it's COVID and you know, all these things was going on, and Honorable Alan Chasney was in the background pushing for it to happen, as far as I'm aware, you know. So I don't know if later he felt that it was against him, but he was very much pushing for the police to grant us permission and all these things. So I did not view it as any protest against Alan Chasney. That is my view, you know.
The stigmatization of persons who have served time at the Bordelais Correctional Facility, ex-inmates, and how they are reintroduced into our communities and so on. Do you think also that is something that's worthy of addressing, so that we could have a situation where after people have served their time and possibly rehabilitated, because we have to look at the deficiencies of the BCF, proper programs and initiatives of that nature to ensure that people are properly rehabilitated, so that we reduce on the rate of recidivism. What say you to this particular issue?
Well, again, the training is very important. The rehabilitation is very important in the prison system, and it should not be a system whereby it's only based on punishment, you know, because people have families, because we go to the prison sometimes and speak with the inmates, you know, encourage them, let them know that's not the end of their lives, you know. They made a mistake and they have to pay their dues to society, but they will be coming back into society, and they have to make sure that they conduct themselves in a way to remain a free man or a free woman, you know, because, you know, like Ashanti sang in a song one time, you know, prison is from time to time human beings make mistakes and they're going to end up there, you know. So we must not believe as if, well, when somebody goes to jail, that's, you know, that's pretty much a death sentence. Depends on what you do, actually, you know. So we have to ensure that we train these people, rehabilitate them, so when they come back into society, that they could, you know, make a full integration back into society. So the BCF, they have to look at their programming, and we're always thankful that they're giving us the opportunity to come into the prisons and talk to the prisoners and so on, and let them know that, you know, their family waiting for them out there, you know, and make sure they don't repeat any kind of offense to end up back in there, you know.
With regard to the worsening crime problem in St. Lucia, generally speaking, how do you think we can tackle this? When, for example, you can have a situation where in broad daylight, somebody or two men traveling on a motorcycle can basically use a high-powered firearm discharge it,
Wow.
resulting in one young male being killed and another being injured, and the possibility does exist that many other people could have been either injured or killed. How do we send a message out there that this needs to stop?
Man, I in talking about that, I probably need to look into the camera to talk to these people, talk to these young men, I mean, my brothers, I don't know what that person could have done to you all for you all to move that kind of way and come, on a motorcycle and open fire like that in a public place, my brothers. I don't know what that person had done to you all to deserve that. I know there's a lot of disrespect going out there among youth, among the young men, a lot of disrespect, a lot of cheating going on amongst, that one take that one goods. I know there's a lot of these things going on out there, but my brothers, that's not the way. That's not the way. Your sister could have been there, your mother could have been there. Who knows, one of your relatives could have been there and gotten hurt or probably even killed. My brothers, that's not the way to solve the problems. If you have an issue with somebody, try to reach out to an elder in your community. Try to reach out to somebody you can trust and let them know the situation and see if somebody could intervene and have some kind of mediation. But that really, really is out of place, that kind of behavior, my brothers. And we all really need to check. We cannot go down as a society. We cannot be behaving that kind of a way. They have children, in the area. My goodness, my brothers, you all really need to check your behavior. And whatever it is persons have done to you all that hurt you all so badly, and you all really need to, get some healing. Some healing. You all need to get some healing of a situation you're going through. And there are others like you all out there that might be looking at that and want to do the same thing, or might be looking forward to hurting somebody in such a way. I appealing to you all, my brothers. I'm making an appeal to you all to find other ways to deal with the situation. Try to reach out to people you all can trust and have a conversation, have some sort of mediation, and see how we could bring this thing to a close. Revenge will only bring more revenge and more bloodshed, my brothers. But that behavior there on the Derek Walcott Square, that was totally off, my brothers, and check what is happening, man. There are children that could have been killed in that whole drive-by thing, man. Check yourself, my brothers. I appeal to you all. I appeal to you all, better angels, and your conscience. Have a conscience, my brothers, because it's not good at all, my brothers.
We'll put a telephone number on screen so that you can call with your questions and comments as we have our discussion on this program, Newsmaker Live on DBS Television, and my guest, Mr. Aaron Alexander, President of the Ayanola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari. What do you think that the legislators should do? Because there's need for some kind of deterrence.
Yes.
And criminal elements are emboldened for one reason or the other. Maybe the fact that they know they are not likely to be caught, to be brought to justice and so on. But we have a call. Yeah. Good evening to you. This is Newsmaker Live. You're in the air.
Thank you very much, Mr. Polio, and to Brother Aaron.
Yes.
Good evening to you.
Let me just say very quickly, I know people may want to share. You see, this gentleman or these guys who pulled that trigger, they had died 1,000 deaths before they resorted to that behavior. There is no way you can end someone's life, even in the way it was done, and that something egregious would not have happened to you. Your humanity must have been stripped, whether it was philosophical, whether it was socially, whether it was through the education system, whether it was through the justice system, whether it was through the absent fathers, and all of the stuff you all have mentioned there, whether it may have been through the passage down through the DNA. These men, young men, would have died 1,000 deaths before they got to the point. Because for human beings to behave in that manner, they would have been forged in a certain fire that would have created that individual.
Sure.
And I'm sorry it's getting to that point, but it will take more than just conversations. I hear, let me go straight to the point. I applaud Aaron, I applaud everyone who's coming out to speak. But Tim, I'm hearing older folks. I'm not hearing the youth. I'm not hearing the National Youth Council. I'm not hearing the National Students Council. I'm not hearing the young man on the block who is in the belly of the beast having a conversation with you and saying, this is where I hurt, and this is how I have been harmed, and this is what's going on in my head. This is the voice I need. Nobody's hearing me, therefore I'm speaking to the gun. If our people were as bad as some people are making it seem, why do you have young men dropping out of school and can still obtain high-powered weapons and can have motorcycles and can still coordinate an operation like that? It tells me that the education system that you alluded to is also one of the deaths that is a recurring decimal, and that the fact that a young person can come out of the system and still be able to execute at such a level, there is an education that they are missing. There is a part of their intelligence that is being ignored, and they say that I can do this, I can do things. If you only educate me or take me through the right processes in my life, empower me, see what more I can do if I direct that energy elsewhere. And I just wanted to throw that out there and implore everyone, especially the young people. Tim, I would love to see you with a former inmate, a young offender, somebody who has been there, who has walked the road, who has the scars, and they say, this is what is hurting me, and this is why I am doing this. To me, that will speak louder and resonate. Thank you so much for having your guest and for giving me the opportunity to share this. And I hope that perhaps at some point I get an opportunity as well. I am a former Karagami ambassador team, and this is one of the things that we discussed. It's all over the region, and I would love to at some point be able to speak with somebody that we can bring in these young people, because they are fearful. And as I exit him, you asked about the system. So you have the system creating the frail youth, the system destroying the society, the system setting the justice system, the system educating the police, the system educating the news reporter, which is you, the very same system that is filled with flaws and ways of dehumanizing and removing the manhood of these young males is messing them up and coming back to punish them. These young men do not need to be punished. They need to be recalibrated. You know, you said prison has to be different. Of course, something has to happen, and it cannot happen in the way that it's happening. As long as we're going to do it the way we're doing it there, it will continue to get worse. Thank you so much for the time and great program.
Thank you so much, sir. What's you?
Tim, I have 13 crime fighting suggestions to whoever who's listening. Some of the police are already doing. Continued surprise roadblocks. Number 2, deliberate engagement with young men on the blocks. Grassroots organizations like RISE, Ubuntu Movement, ICA can assist in that area. Number 3, those with problems or enemies, initiate mediations. Number 4, offer amnesty for turning in illegal guns. Number 5, more school pep talks and to reject violence and teaching our children to respect themselves and have more self-worth and so on.
Okay, as we go along, we'll number 6 and up to number 10. Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Yes, want to make a contribution, please.
Go ahead, please, caller, you're on the air. Yes, good evening to you, caller. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Aaron.
Yes, sir.
Do you hear me, Mr. Aaron?
Caller, go ahead. We are hearing you. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good rapport, man. Government lightning and team there. I was surprised that team saying Black Lives Matter was all over the world. All over the world. You show, team, you are ignorant.
Okay, caller. Thank you so much for calling. Yeah, go ahead. We have another call. Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Good evening to you, and good evening to you, Brother Iran.
Good evening to you, Colin.
Brother Iran, I feel everything that you've said.
Thank you, my brother.
I believe one of my fault thinking is that solutions. Some of us know what to do, but we refuse to do it for all kind of other reasons and foolish reasons. But tonight, listening to you, I want to suggest one thing, Brother Iran, and I don't know if you're gonna take that one up. It may take a long time to materialize and to give us proper youth and good youth. But I think it is time now, while the time has passed, I think it is necessary that we have some form of youth movement in this country. Just like places like Guyana have the young people in an organized way.
Yeah, but Colin, we have the National Youth Council in St. Lucia.
The National Youth Council is a talker. They talk. I'm saying to have a proper movement where we guide, we train, we discipline, and we bring up young people. And in the long run, those young people who have understood the rights and the youth in society, have people like young Aaron, have some of the cadets come in. It has to be a movement where we take those young people out of where they are, put them in camp, whether it's boot camp or whatever it is. It may take a very long time before they change, but I think this is the way we need to go. We cannot be talking. The young people ridiculing some of us. You understand? Yes, Brother Aaron could have gone this afternoon and help out and don't get himself cursed out. I myself do the same. I approach it in ways that I don't get myself into trouble. But many of us should have been doing that. But I think that we have got to bring our children, our young boys and girls who are Australia, how do you call that? The place where they take them to Marshall and those places, that is not going to help. I think we need to take them out, get them, organize them, educate them, and make them the kind of role models that we want. We bring them out there and we talking, will not make sense. I think we need some action, and I hope you understand me.
Yeah, man.
And we can look at that as a nation to change our young people. Our young people will not, their mothers and fathers will not correct them. The police is only going to arrest them. What we need to do is to get this person-to-person involvement with them and change their lifestyle. This is a suggestion that I am putting out there. We God take it along, but I think it's going to work in the longer run. We will have better young people in the longer run. Let us get face to face. Like what you already did report there was very good. But that's only a tip of it. We need to get our youth out, and we have proper people there to guide and protect them and to make them better citizens. Have a very good show, Aaron.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
You're well up there.
Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you.
But the only thing, based on what the caller is suggesting, that we need a more systematic approach. Maybe that's where the government comes in.
I find the National Youth Council, they too quiet him. I find they need to be more militant, you know. They need to wake up, man, and do something, because they have the power to do it, but they have not seized that power and move with that power and move the ministry and move the ministers too, you know. I think
maybe they don't have the resources. I mean, the kind of subvention that is required to undertake programs of that nature.
No, they don't take money for it to organize a protest with the kind of crime things that going on. The youth fund have to mobilize themselves and get together, make little contributions among themselves, do a little fundraiser. They can do stuff. You don't have to depend on government for everything. Do things to raise your funds and do things.
We have a call. Good evening to you. Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Hello, good evening, team.
Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening to you, caller.
Hi, Aaron. How you doing?
Good evening. I'm all right, my brother.
Okay. I have to applaud Aaron for his effort. Civil society, the government as it relates to dealing with crime in the country. But you know, the reality, team, the heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. And as long as man's heart, as long as there isn't a transformation in man's heart, that problem will persist.
But how do you
the only person that can do that, the only person that can do that is God.
Well, God should be at the helm of the government in terms of our leadership. Let's have a theocracy instead of having
a church state.
Yeah, have a church state. Have a theocracy.
Have a theocracy, a church state.
And you see exactly. You see, you just enforcing my point, because a while ago in Aaron's appeal, he made reference to the church. And that's the problem we have, you know. When certain recommendations come from church leaders and the church, they are ridiculed. They are marginalized, and they are considered, you know, they are called all sorts of names. So that's the problem. But the reality is, and I understand your argument, and if our leaders were godly leaders, you'd have seen the results in our society. It would have helped curb crime, because if their worldview was a biblical worldview, a lot of policies, government policies, would have helped to curb and eradicate crime to a certain level. But even the very policies, laws that are enacted are not biblical. And so for that reason, you find our society is in that mess. Man has no regards for his brother. Man has no regards for man. Man does not realize that man was made in the image of God. I mean, just that one thought, just that one reality. If you consider a life, if you consider a man, and you consider his creator, his maker, you will value that life, you will value that individual, and there will be no space in your heart to take a gun or a knife or a stone or whatever weapon it is and murder that individual. But I go back to my initial point. The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. Government has its place. God ordained government. The government, the politicians have to understand they have a responsibility first to God, and then to man. But if you ignore the very person that is responsible for putting you in power, so to speak, because every elected member of government is God's intervention, is God's providence, and politicians don't realize that the first course of action, that the first responsibility is to God and not to man. And that is the problem. And I'm not saying that Christians should be politicians. I'm not saying that, because that's not what St. Lucia wants. That's not what the world wants. But I am saying, at least, if man individually take responsibility for himself and his life and his action, and trust God, and call upon God, and give God his rightful place on the throne of the heart, then that will assist in the crime problem. And until that happens, I applaud ICA, I applaud the government, I applaud civil society, I applaud all these various organizations and groups, you know, that's making contributions significantly to try and curb crime. But I am saying the heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. And unless there is a transformation in man's heart, there cannot be a transformation in man's thinking. Man will continue to think diabolically till God touches his heart. Remove that heart of stone and give him a heart of flesh. And that self is a miracle. That is a life of faith. That is the solution to the problem. Good night. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Thank you so much, Colin. I don't know if I agree with him entirely, because for eons now, for generations, men, you have a section of the society, any society, that will be diabolical, that will be wicked, that will be deviant, that will not go according to accepted principles and standards in any society.
Tim, I put it simply by saying prayers is not enough.
But you need to maintain law and order in any society.
That's
Otherwise, if you fail to do that, it becomes chaotic.
And with us as Rastafari, we say you must work and pray. So you must do the work. You must put in the time to put systems in place, put things in place. You can't just be praying for things to fall out of the sky. You have to have the practicality, the training, and the know-how to put things in place likewise.
Another call. Good evening. Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Hello, good evening, Tim.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening
to you.
Alexander.
Good evening.
Very good program. Let me tell you, Mr. Alexander, I agree with a lot of what you say. I agree with the gentleman who spoke a while ago. However, Mr. Alexander and Tim, I want you all to realize I'm living very close to a school and I'm observing a lot of things. It's not only the males that are giving the the young women now are coming treacherous. They're getting just like the males and they're getting worse than the males. So we also have to take them into consideration. The women too, not only the young men, but the women too, the young girls too. And one of the things that I think is this. Sometimes when governments are in power, certain persons will say, I will help, I will do this, I will do that, I will try to assist and so. Once the government has gone out of power, they just give up. It's like they show as if they're not interested anymore because that was not their motive. It is what is the person's motives when you see they go out and they tell you they're going to do certain things. It's not for, sometimes it's not for the country, sometimes it's for their personal gain. And this is what we have to run away from. Persons who go out there to speak to those children should be persons who go out for the furtherance of our country and the morals in our country. Tim, I am seeing something happening, and what I feel too that government what they can do is persons coming in to speak to those children after they have left high school, they should be in a program. They should be enlisted in a program, either to assist others. A lot of these children are not put into social programs where they assist others. They learn compassion. They learn how to share. They learn how to take care of. And agriculture can pull in. The health system can pull in. Look, in the health system, we're complaining every day. They don't have this, they don't have that. Use the young people. The young people are there. Use them. Use them in different programs. And also, I keep on talking about having programs for anger management. Anger management in the schools. And it's just falling on deaf ears. Another thing, Timothy, when we say that the children are this and the children are that, what about the parents? Are they any better? Are the homes better? The homes these children are in, is it better? Are the parents showing a good example to those children? In many cases, no. I have noticed parents going to the school, and when you hear them speak, you wonder what is going on. Timothy, this is a serious thing going on here, and unless government take it with the church and with other social organizations, not for motive of personal motive, but motive for the country, we just spitting top in mud. Have a good evening, gentlemen.
Yes. Thank you so much for calling.
Tim, I want to share a couple more of the points I have there. Yeah, I want to say number 6, offer rewards for information which leads to arrests and convictions. Number 7, initiate a regional witness protection program through the RSS. Number 8, increase funding to community youth sports and social clubs. Number 9, implement highway patrols, especially in the advent of so many accidents. Tim, have some highway patrol on the highway leading up to Grosile and the Bexon highway where you have all these accidents happening. They have some form of highway patrol that will deter drivers that are driving careless and reckless. I think if we have so many motorbikes, the Prime Minister just give them so much equipment. The police need to make better use of those things and have those motorbikes on highway patrol. Nobody knows where they are stationed, but the drivers know that there's highway patrol. They'll behave themselves, Tim. So all these things can help with the situation we're going through.
We'll go to the other in just a moment. Good evening to you, Newsmaker Live. You're on the air.
Good evening, Tim, and your guest.
Good evening to you, caller.
Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome, sir.
Tim, I've been listening. I'm not on the island, but I've been listening, and I've heard the gentleman talk about the great people from before, like Martin Luther King and Garvey and all these people, which were people of old and had their time and did what they did, which was good. But Tim, we have to go further back than those guys, you know. We had the wisdom of Solomon. We have books with us today that showed us that when the righteous is in power, the people rejoice. And when the wicked is in power, the people mourn. So I'm saying all this to say, Tim, that we have to go way back and see what worked then. because it can still work today. It's just that we moved away from it. You know, in my growing up, I know that I saw people hang. They killed somebody, and they had to be dealt with, and the other people had respect to that, and the crime level was not like that. And I'm saying this again to say that these things from way of old, before Garvey and before all of these people, we have the books that talk about people way before these people. And we know that when the righteous was in power, the people rejoiced. And when the wicked was in power, the people mourned. We have writings that say that what was taught back then, we should have teach them to our children. That they in turn would teach them to their children and to their children. And that the nations would grow up having a fear of God first of all, and a fear of doing wrong. But we don't have that today. I am not hard for either side of the government. But when the Prime Minister, Mr. Shastny, got into power, he made a prayer. It was a long prayer in the nation. He didn't just address it, he prayed. But people didn't look at that. People are running away from prayer. We're taking it out of schools. Look at what's happening to America. One guy said, if you want to know where we're going, look at our past. And you will see where we're going. So it's okay to talk about these men of old. They were good men. They stood for the righteousness of the nations back then, but it goes even beyond that. It goes beyond that. We need to get back to the scripture. That's what we need to get to, And I know some people will not want to go there, but that's what worked. We cannot deny it. That is what worked. One more phrase. They hated him without a cause. Why? Because what he did good. He fought against the violence, the injustice, the woman that committed adultery. These are the things that we were supposed to instill into our children, that they then would in turn teach them to their children, and it would go on and on and on. And the nations that would be today would be nations that have that in them. But we don't have that today because we have gone away from all that. We're going for all other things in slavery and all the other ideologies and ideas. But we're not looking at what works. We need to get back to the punishment. So how can you just take a man's life? How can you just take a man's life for God's sake and you walking around alive? It sounds like cruelty when we say about it now, but what about the person who's dead? Didn't they have a right to live? Wouldn't they have a right to be brought to justice for the crime they committed against the guy who killed him? These are the things that the courts need. All that has to go back. Look, they want you to put your hand on the Bible when you go to court to swear. But they're not interested in what's in the Bible. Or in the scriptures, I should say, because the word Bible is not in the Bible. The word scripture is in the Bible. The word Bible is given by man. But we have scriptures that's supposed to govern nations, govern people. But people believe that man just write that. And then man would write, it is not good for a man to touch a woman. Which man would write that against himself? That's inspired writings that's supposed to govern us today. But we run away from it. We have some talk show hosts that say, I don't know the Bible, so I ain't going there. But you're going to have to face it. That is what worked. That is what worked, and that's what we need to get back to. The parents of these people who are harboring these people, they were not taught that. If they knew that, they would be able to see down the road and ask themselves, how does this affect me down the road? How will this affect my family if I don't straighten my kid out now? Thank you, Tim. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much. All the best to you, caller. We have another call. Good evening. News Maker Live, you on the air.
Hello, yes.
Good evening to you, caller.
Yes, I hear somebody's talking, so waiting for my turn.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, but I'm watching on TV and the man is still talking. So
turn down the volume of your television set. We have always said that. Turn down the volume of the television set.
I'm doing that.
And then you will go ahead with your contribution, caller.
Okay, I'm doing that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
My contribution is I find it strange when I hasn't brought that up. Music has a big part to play with it.
What's that?
Music has a big part to play for our country is going right now. Because there's nothing conscious on an early morning where it be on the radio and people's car passing. People play a kind of absurd music. Am I being heard by Timothy and thing? Or
We are hearing you, caller. We are hearing you.
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening,
Hello.
brother. Go ahead.
Like I was saying, yes, good evening again.
Caller is being distracted by his television.
Yes, because I'm not hearing myself. I'm actually very low and I'm saying like you're hearing me.
Just go ahead with your contribution. We are listening to you, caller.
Okay. Okay. I was telling you. Hello?
Yes, speak my man, speak my brother, we hear you. Talk about the music, you talk about the music, go ahead.
Yes, yeah, the music, okay? We've been playing too much absurd music in this country. And I think, if you check it out, if we only play jazz for the whole year, we'll get a lot of jazz fans. If we play a lot of religious music every day, that may change the hearts of people. When you tell me early in the morning, people playing some kind of absurd tunes, and some guys have it in their cars, early 7 o'clock in the morning, they pack by a school to buy garbage children or buy from a sub shop selling some food, all kind of, when I tell you absurd, and you know what I'm talking about, Aaron knows it too. I mean, I was up in the 70s, 80s, and then kind of time there, and we didn't have that kind of music going to school. And now, anything goes. And they have children now, they don't know about Bunny Wheeler, they don't know about Peter Tosh, they don't know about Bob Marley music, but they know about Skilly Bang and all these kind of people are pushing a kind of
corruption.
That's my view to it, and I listen on the TV, but really got a big part to play in it.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think it depends on your mentality, your mindset, your upbringing, and your ability to be swayed in one way or the other. That's
and to realize that the artists who sing in this music, that don't necessarily mean that's how they live.
And to see that's entertainment.
Exactly. We have to be able to draw the line. You
have a call. Good evening to you. Newsmaker Live on the air.
Yeah, good night.
Good evening to you. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Good night. Aaron.
Yes.
What I have to say, right? Unless you have to restore confidence back in the country, it will be criminal stuff. No matter how much people tell you that, restore confidence will be the best thing to do back in the country. Mr. Pedro want to say it, tell you what you have to say.
Okay, thank you so much. What's it to this?
Well, I need to say that we need more community policing, outreach programs to cultivate greater community trust in the police. I want to say that we need to use a portion of the health and security tax that the government has implemented and seek other financial interventions to complement that, so we could provide a monthly stipend for youth at risk ages 18 to 25 who are actively seeking employment. If we give this youth a stipend, that could sway them away from crime as well. That could be used as a deterrent. So we can use some of those funds to do that. Implement better parenting programs. 13, implement programs to combat the legacy of the post-traumatic slave syndrome, which we have already spoken about. We saw in times gone by all the uproar that was in Vieux-Fort with all the murders and so on, and now Vieux-Fort is very quiet. And I know that is due in part to the efforts of organizations like RISE and Ubuntu Movement. So we need to get those interventions, continue those interventions. That was great interventions, and we need to implement that in other parts of the island as well. So that's my 14-point plan in terms of suggestions for crime fighting team.
Thank you so much. We'll take a final call. Good evening to you, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening.
Yes, so Mr. Alexander, you said about the post-traumatic slave syndrome. What do you call it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Post-traumatic slave syndrome. So I'm wondering why it did not exist in your generation. To me, with the advent of drugs and guns, that's why we have all these killings, because when you use a gun on somebody, it's almost a point of no return. So when you shoot them, most times it's fatal. So I think that is why, because of the drugs and the crime, that is why we find that we have so many killings nowadays. Because in the generation of our generation, the generations before, we didn't have all those murders in St. Lucia. I remember in 1984, We probably had one murder a year or two murders a year. So why so many murders now? I don't think it's anything to do with slavery. And I think the people really cannot take the pace of the developing world, of what they've seen on the TV of the U.S. And also we have a lot of drugs in schools now, because the drugs go to the children in the schools. So the children are angry at the school, and they have low tolerance to anything, and then they fight with each other because some of them are very high. So I don't think it's anything to do with slavery. I think it's tolerance and some other things Timothy said as well, like the parenting and the young parents and the fathers, the absent fathers, and all these things have a lot to do with what's happening, and the poverty as well. But I don't believe that the post-traumatic slave syndrome is anything, because it would have affected generations and generations, not just this generation. Okay,
ma'am. Thank you so much for calling.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I want to say to the caller, it affects us in different ways, caller. Violence is one of the ways that it affects us, but it affects us in different ways, because when we grew up in our time, like you say, you grew up in the 70s, you grew up in the 80s, it was not so acute, we did not have those high murder rates, but there were other things. There were fathers abandoning their families, and they had a lot of single parent household. A lot of children were in poverty, and these children now grew up, and they now have children at a very young age, and it's a cycle that continues. So it has its place. It's not one thing. Like I said earlier, it's not just about post-traumatic slave syndrome, the poverty and all these things. Even when you look at poverty, how did we end up in poverty? When we look at the way that we started off as a country after independence, we were never given any reparations to say that we were paid a certain amount of money after we were exploited for hundreds of years by the British. When they granted us independence, we never received a purse full of money or any kind of assistance to get our economy going and so on. So we started off at zero. So all these things cause us to be even in poverty today. When you look at the high level of debt, when we became independent, all the developments that were already in the country, the British actually passed that on to us as debt, when it's supposed to be, we're supposed to start with a clean slate. So we start off our economy in debt, and it's just a marvelous thing to see how some of our prime ministers and ministers of finance have been able to manage the country, that we're not in utter poverty, today, but we started off on a wrong foot. So the poverty we see today is a direct result of the poverty of coming out of the British Empire and all the domination and all the exploitation of the British for over 100 years or so. And we were never paid a cent for that, not a dime. So the poverty we see today is a direct result of all these things. And even now, with the reparations that Caribbean countries are calling for, one of the main things that they're asking for is debt cancellation. Remove the Caribbean countries out of debt. Do not pass your debt on to us. You all owed us. You all did some developments, and when you all grant us independence, you all say, okay, the country is already saddled with debt right there from independence. So we started off on a wrong foot first to begin with. So all this poverty you see is a direct result coming out of slavery, coming out of colonialism. We saddled with all this debt, and we're in all this utter poverty and so much debt in the country right now.
Mr. Aaron Alexander, President of ICA, thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live.
You're most welcome, my brother.
And to you, as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked.
Whatever you give a woman, she'll receive it, multiply it, give it back to you. Whatever you give a woman, are you listening, brothers? She'll never give you back what you gave her. She'll multiply it first. She's designed that way. If you give a woman a sperm, you'll never get a sperm back. She'll multiply it, give you a baby. If you give her a house, she'll multiply it, give you a home. If you give her groceries, she'll give you a meal. If you give her frustration, she'll multiply it. Yeah. So brothers, if you don't like what you are getting, change what you're giving.
That's a very good evening. My name is Timothy Polion, saying good night and see you next time.
I, Philip Joseph here.
I would like to be judged as being the Prime Minister, not being judged as being part of a government.
Came into government that we had a manifesto and a vision and mission that had been approved by my party, by the highest body.
Basel 11 has not been in existence. 50 was...
Giant getting bazooka. You spraying big on to knock out mosquitoes.
I have never had a joint account with anybody in my life. Not my ex-wife, not my children, nobody. And I will refer that to the privileges committee.
What about the culture of people getting into office and not being effective in terms
What people become prime minister of St. Lucia have been the most ready.
Let's do it this Wednesday, because if it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live.